Liz, it's so great to hang out with you right now. I'd love to introduce you to mindful yoga with Liz. And one of the things that I feel like is really interesting about your background, that I'm so excited to dive into more about, is that you have an actual kids yoga studio, which is not that common these days, especially after the pandemic, too. A lot of people had to give away their spaces. And I noticed you have a class just for boys. And this is
I
probably not
do.
boys, but also open up to those who identify as in a male body, right? And so,
Yes.
or vice versa. So I want to talk to you more about how to get buy-in from boys to have boys into your classes. So to start, I'd love to hear your background. I want to know who you are and what you've been up to and how you kind of came to build the studio and doing what you're doing now.
Yeah, of course. Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me. Very
Yeah.
excited to be here and honored. So I started teaching in 2012. So my background is actually not yoga. My background is in mortgages, which
Right.
always gives everyone a chuckle. So I started
Yeah.
in corporate, like many yoga teachers actually.
Yeah.
And I had started taking classes at the advice of a therapist that I was seeing because I had stress from work, from just the corporate world, and mortgages is just a very high stressful industry.
Yeah.
And then on top of that, I had two family members at the time that both had cancer. So she had suggested I try yoga, which I had the very typical response. It's too slow. I don't want to move that slow. It's going to
Mm.
be boring. I won't enjoy it. And I used to take classes at the gym, like cycling classes, weightlifting. And the cycling class was canceled one day, and it was $4 to take the yoga class. So I tried it. And I very quickly, like most people, just knew. I immediately realized I wasn't breathing properly.
Mm.
I started dabbling with different studios in my area and realized I was sleeping better. I wasn't waking up as anxious. The things that were happening in life were still happening, but they didn't feel as big as they did before. So I went in to take a 200-hour training. And the first day of the training, the teacher says, raise your hand if you want to teach at the end, in 8 months when we're done with this. And there was like maybe 3 out of 23 people that had their hands
Right.
raised.
Yeah. So
So she
interesting,
said,
right? Yeah.
yeah. So she said, this happens every year. Look around.
Yeah.
And at the end of your training, I'm going to ask the same question, and most of your hands, if not all, will be up. And I just thought immediately, like, I'm not teaching. I have no desire. I just want to learn more because I'm really enjoying this and it makes me feel good. And within that training was Friday. And that Sunday, that first weekend, I knew I wanted to teach kids. I moved from a city area to an upstate area going into high school. So everyone knows the new kid, right? So I was a new kid. I didn't know anyone.
Yeah.
It was a very, 13 is a very pivotal stage to make such a big change.
Mm.
And I just kept thinking if I could bring this to children, the younger they learn, the more they'll soak up. They're sponges, so they'll just take it all in. And then if I had learned all these tools earlier on in life, what would have changed? It would have been,
Right.
maybe life would have been different, but I just thought that kids, immediately I knew that Sunday. And I remember going in on Sunday and I was like, I want to teach kids. And I had 3 teachers and they were like, you're nuts.
Yeah.
Kids? And I was like, kids, they're great. Like, why wouldn't I want to teach kids?
Right.
And immediately after, I finished that training in August, and then I enrolled in a 95-hour children's training, and I finished that following February. And then it was like, you just scratched the surface, and it was yin and restorative and Reiki, and it was like
Right.
one after the next.
Yeah. I love that.
And
I love how you
yeah,
found it from your own personal journey first, that like you said, it's very common in our industry. And I love then that there was like this spark. And that is also common too. It's bringing together this passion and then you're taking the training and then there's this moment, right? There's this moment that hits us where it all
mhm,
becomes clear. And then as you said, it just kind of like boop, and here we are now 20 years
yeah,
later, right?
yeah, yeah, pretty much, just
Yeah.
about,
Yeah,
about there.
exactly. So tell us more about, okay, this boys class, this only boys class. I really wish I could be a fly on the wall and zoom over there and see what it's all about. So what do you sort of backing up, right? What are you seeing are both sort of the benefits that the boys are getting by being in a boys only class, but also kind of those challenges, right? Because generally speaking, I think about most of the after school classes that we see around where we are and what I've heard from community, mostly girls. We do get some
Mhm.
boys, but I love that it's boys only. So tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah, so it started with my stepson actually. I met them when they were 5 and 6. I have a stepdaughter and a stepson. And Dylan was 5 and Madison was 6. And they took yoga with me. They would come to workshops and classes and they loved it. And you know, when I start, so I start with the toddlers and I have a fairly amount of a pretty good amount of boys.
Mm.
It starts out pretty boy heavy. And
Mm.
5 and 6 was still pretty boy heavy. And when Dylan hit about 8, 9, 10, he started to notice the boys were starting to dwindle and it was more
Mm.
girls as he moved into the upper classes. And so one day he said, Lizzie, I don't know if I want to do these classes anymore because I'm the only boy.
Right.
So I said, well, we'll just make a boy class. Like I have a teen girl class and a tween girl class. Why can't we have a boy class? So I made a boy class and I did some research and I looked to see, what sports teams, and I knew the Seahawks did yoga every day and I knew the Lakers did yoga every day and the Heats. And so I kind of used that as a little bit of my in to let them know
Mm.
that this was why we were doing it. And it took off pretty quickly. And I started it in 2016, 2016, 2017, and
Mm.
it's still going strong.
Right. And so what are you seeing? What are they boys getting out of it? What are you seeing the differences?
So a lot of the boys that come, it varies. So, and it's so interesting because their energy is so different.
Mm.
So a lot of the boys that come are either the boys who really don't have any interest in sports
Yeah.
or
Correct.
have so much interest in sports, but are still slightly intrigued as to what yoga has to offer to them. And they've
Mm.
heard that some of their, if they play basketball, they've heard that the Lakers do yoga, but they're not 100% sure what that looks like. And in
Right.
our schools in our area, if I go into school, so if they meet me, they know how I do yoga with them. But if they don't, they have a yoga unit in PE, it's more of a tape. So if they have
Mm.
that tape or that video, it's a little different.
Mm.
So the buy-in is where I give them challenging poses. So
Mm.
I have to hook them. So
Yeah.
their hook is usually like arm balances and those challenging poses that they need that challenge to almost prove to themselves
Yeah.
that they can be there. But then they get there and they see there's all these other boys and some play sports and some don't play sports
Mm.
and they're just in a room with other boys.
Right.
And then
Right.
it doesn't feel so labeled as that girl sport.
Yeah, right. Yeah, so that's the thing that we hear about is how you get buy-in from boys, right? To practice. And what you're saying there is, link it to sports or maybe music or anything else that, you know, that has them be interested. So it has to be relevant and meaningful to them. I remember when I was doing some research for our yoga mindfulness for young athletes resource, I did this research on I like exactly what you said, going through all the sports players who mentioned how they use
Mm-hmm.
yoga. It was amazing. I mean, there's like a couple pages worth
Yeah.
in there, right? So that's one thing. And then you're talking about it has to be challenging. So meet them where they're at to have it more challenging or see for them to see the breadth of yoga, that it isn't just,
Right.
sitting on the top of a mountain, sitting cross-legged, right? But what can we share with them that they're interested in, right? So the strengthening, the flexibility, and then also how that yoga can the postures in particular, how that can support their sports, their athletics. Is that right?
Right.
Yeah. Do you
Yeah.
have any other ways you get buy-in from them?
Yeah. So I kind of just asked them, like, what's the harm in trying something new?
Right.
Like,
Mm.
you have to try it. You never know. You might enjoy it. You might like it.
Right.
Um, and typically they will if they see the, so part of the buy-in is just seeing the other boys, being in the same
Yes.
room
Yeah.
as other boys. And then when I tell them, when we get into a little bit of the philosophical aspect of yoga and I tell them that it was actually originally intended only for men, their minds are blown. And then I'll show them some poses that women that we struggle with because our bodies are just different.
Yeah.
And they're mind blown that it was actually for men. So that's another buy-in. That's one that they enjoy hearing.
Right.
And I always get a good response out of that.
Yeah.
And
So
then
take,
Shavasana.
yeah,
Shavasana is
right.
the third buy-in. I
Yeah.
don't think I've met, if in all the years I've been doing this since 2012, if I've met maybe 5 kids that didn't enjoy Shavasana. That's a lot.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah. Because
They
when do they
notice
get,
how they feel after.
right. Right. Yeah. Yeah. I was just speaking to somebody from Yoga Alliance, and she was saying there's a new bill in Illinois that is requiring 20 minutes of relaxation time per week in classrooms. I mean, that is mind blowing to me, because the first thing I think of, because I'm a teacher sub, first thing I think of are those super active boys in class, right? Stereotypically. Wow. If they had a chance to relax, wow.
Yeah.
Because they're not, oftentimes they're coming to class with their engines. This is girls and boys, but their engines are running fast and they're just so dysregulated they can't actually be with the content, the curriculum,
Right.
right? Or be with
Yeah.
each other. But to have that moment, you're giving such a gift to them to have the shavasana at the end. I love that. Well,
Yeah.
yeah, tell us more about that. If we were to come and show up at your class, how do you structure the class? What does a class look like?
Yeah. So when they first get there, I always have a mindfulness activity out. So usually it's brain flakes where they can make things, or I'll have a sensory bin out with maybe some sand in it. Sometimes it's Legos, or there's this little game that has a big person doing yoga, and then there's little tiny goats, and you have to stack them all on top.
Oh,
So just kind of something for them to kind of sit and do together. And that creates that sense of camaraderie. So now they're working together to try to build these different things together. And then we'll just, as we're doing that together, because I always join with them. So as we're doing it together, I'm asking them, about their day and how it's been going and how their week was. And then we start to converse from there. And then I always have one boy who says, so what game are we playing today? Because we always play a game. So what game are you playing today? So first we'll do a flow. And actually one of the boys the other day had said that his favorite part was the flow. And I told him my favorite part when I take a class is the flow, because it gets me out of my head, the constant movement and the linking the breath with the movement.
right.
So then we'll do a flow, we'll play a little game. Sometimes the game goes a lot longer. We do an obstacle course where they're consistently moving. And I have 6th, 7th, 8th graders that'll do hopscotch, and they'll walk on a balance beam with a stuffed animal on their head, and they'll try to go upside down. They'll do wall squares. And then eventually we get back to our mats, we start to slow it down a little bit. And then we end with Shavasana, and I'll typically read them a story or do a guided meditation at the end.
Oh my gosh, I love it. My daughter's in 7th. That would be amazing. If we lived closer, we would totally be coming, right? Because, and it's, as you say, it's hard to get buy-in for that age group, but you sound like you really found that niche. You really have found what they need and offering, they're coming for what they want, but you're offering what they really need. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
amazing.
And I think it's important to just meet them where they are too. I had someone step in for me last week as a sub, and I gave her the quick rundown of each boy in the class and how their energy levels were. And I said, the best advice I can give to you right now is don't try to control it. Just move with them, let them lead and be the facilitator. Manage it, manage the behavior, but don't try to control it, because number one, what you resist persists. And number two, you're a different person coming into the room. They're not used to you. And some are, they're a little hesitant. I always give a heads up. If I'm not there, I give them a heads up. I think kids like to know someone else is going to be there in place of me.
Yeah.
At class, she said that was the best advice ever. I had the best class with them. They're so much fun. And she said, but holy energy, Batman.
Right.
Because they do.
Right.
They have a ton of energy. And this specific session, so I always go into sessions. It's 4 to 6 weeks with the boys. And each group has about 3 or 4 of the same boys. And then I always get a couple of different ones, new ones trickling in, or old ones that fit in their schedule again. And this particular group, every single boy is so wildly different from the next that it's hard to predict what will happen. So I think it's important to be open-minded, to listen to them. They're being talked at all day long in school. None of the boys that come have been homeschooled, so they're all being talked at all day long, and they just want to be heard. And so I just let them, I followed their lead. So it can be tricky sometimes because I'm in schools as well and I'm big on classroom management. It's a little tricky, but also they're not in school. They're in a place where they're enjoying themselves. And I know that I can give it to them in a way that they can succeed and I can set them up for that success.
Right.
So I follow their lead. And by the end, everybody gets their lavender on their wrist and they head out the door.
Oh my gosh, amazing. And I'm sure, like you said there, I'm sure it is as much about who you be as a teacher, right? Not just what the structure is and how you set it up, but so important that we show up ready to hold a space, that we're calm and organized ourselves, that
Right.
I think that some people might be thinking, might have these preconceived ideas of maybe what it'd be like to work with boys. They might be a little hesitant or scared or whatever, and children can feel that, right? And so if you're open and you're inviting them in and you're excited about it, they're going to feel that too. They're just children, whether they're girls or boys, and they're children, right?
Yeah. And I'm genuinely interested in their day. I want to know how their day was. I want to know what the highlight was and what the low light was, because they're giving me information.
Right.
So now I know if they had a rough day, okay, we can do back bends. We can do things that, we can go upside down. We can increase our self-esteem, and I can meet them and give them these tools. And then throughout the session, they learn that they can do these things at home and they can do them in other aspects and other areas of life. But they're feeding me information, and I'm genuinely interested. I really do want to know how everything is with them and what I can do for them.
Yeah, right. So do you have a story to tell us about one special boy, one of your classes, and maybe one of the impact of the work?
I do. They're so special. So I have 2 brief stories. So I had asked one boy the other day I said, how has yoga affected you? And he said, well, let me just tell you, I used to be so angry. And when I was annoyed, I did not act the way that I do now. And he didn't share how he acted before. He just shared that now he knows that when he's upset, whether it be with his sibling at home or something that happened in school or his favorite basketball team lost, he now walks away, takes a few deep breaths, thinks about what his options are, and then he goes back out when he's ready.
I mean, is there anything better, Liz? Honestly,
there's not.
That's priceless.
There's not.
Right. I mean, that's it. This is the walk away. This is the takeaway. Can you imagine the simplicity of what you're doing is transforming the way he's seeing the world, reducing anger? I mean, what else do we know can create in such a quick moment, that impact, right? That's amazing. That's incredible. Awesome. So, then you had another story.
Boy. I had another boy the other day say, actually just yesterday, he said, Miss Liz, you remember that thing you taught us? Think of, 5 things you can see right now, 4 things you can smell, 3 things you can hear. And I said, I do. And he said, well, you said that it would help with when we're feeling anxious. And I got to tell you, it actually worked.
No kidding.
So I feel like I need their buy-in, but really I think they need my buy-in sometimes. Like they're like, wow, like you actually, and I said, well, I'm so glad that it worked for you. But that's something that now he's transitioning to middle school. So now he'll be able to take that with him. And that wasn't even something, that wasn't the focus of that class. That was just something that I happened to say to them towards the end of class. There was like a siren outside. And I said, well, just close your eyes for 2 minutes and just 5 things you can smell right now. And it wasn't a focus. And so it just goes to show the things that they take away. Just like adults, we go to class, we take what we need, and he took what he needed and he applied it in a situation that he felt anxious in, and
Right.
it worked for him.
That's amazing. Right. That's amazing. So what would you say, Liz, to all those, kids yoga teachers or classroom teachers who are looking to attract boys in particular? And I like how you said at the beginning that, I mean, not all boys love sports. So there's
Mm.
lots of boys out there who are looking for something different and unique. So that, there's that. But, how do we attract boys, and thinking about how do we look at the structure? So what would you say is your biggest advice for people looking to have boy only classes?
Well, we all have to start somewhere, and we won't
Mm,
know unless we try.
right.
So I always say go for it. You'll never know unless you try it. What's the worst that could happen? Meet them where they are.
Yeah.
Don't try to change them, and don't try to control the environment, because there's a reason. There's always a reason behind the behavior.
Mm,
And have patience, lots of bags of
mm,
patience. My
yeah.
boy classes post COVID are so different than pre COVID. All of my classes in general feel different, but that one I feel the energy shift the most.
Oh, interesting. Say more.
Yeah, I don't know if it is because they had more virtual time, there was more screens, they did more virtual
Mm,
schooling, but their energy is so much higher, and
mm,
their conversational skills have
mm,
they need a little more improving, because sometimes they talk over one another. They're
mm.
not actually listening to one another. They're and it's and if I compare it to the same age group with the girls, it's different because the girls are listening to each other and the boys
Mm.
are talking over one another. So that's where I know that they just need to be heard. But their energy now is very, very different from their energy pre-COVID. Pre-COVID,
Mm.
we used to bring crystals out, and they would be intrigued by crystals and what they do and singing bowls. And these boys still enjoy that, but that comes out later on in the session. They
Yeah.
need that physical movement before they can actually settle into learning more about other things that they can do, like
Yeah.
more abstract things.
Right. That's really interesting, Liz, because as a classroom teacher, I'm seeing obviously both genders, all genders.
Right.
I hadn't noticed, if I were to pick apart the the children who I'm seeing the biggest behaviors from, the most disruptive, happen to be male. But it's interesting that you're seeing from two different classes the difference as well. That's really fascinating to me,
Yeah.
right? That because I'm seeing there's a lot of conversation over each other as well, but I kind of
Mm-hmm.
was thinking it was all children. But that's a really interesting thing. So basically, we should all go out there and create more boy only yoga classes.
Yeah.
Sounds
Yeah.
like
Try it.
yes. And if you have any questions for those of you listening, please reach out to Mindful Yoga with Liz. How do we find you online? How do we connect with you and learn
Yeah.
more or ask
So,
any questions?
yeah, all of my social, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and X, I'm under Mindful Yoga with Liz. My website's Mindful Yoga with Liz. Easily accessible. You can email me, message me on any of them. Yeah, I'm always looking for more ways to help other people and other teachers reach more kids, because the
Yeah.
more they're our future, right? So they're going to be the ones that change the world.
Yeah. I love it. Thank you so
Yeah.
much for your time. I so
Thank
appreciate you.
you.
Keep on keeping on. You're doing amazing work. And yeah, we really appreciate you. Thanks for sharing your knowledge and your experience with us.
Thank you so much.